Albeit not much, I'd seen snow before, but never accompanied by a train, and I had had enough of that. Leaving North Carolina in the wee morning hours got me into the snowy parts of Virginia right around sunrise, and I already knew the bet on Mother Nature was going to pay off. It had been a few years since I'd last seen snow, and I was pumped to end the drought as I wandered through the sleepy town of Bluefield, Virginia. Almost immediately, I set up at the town's only grade crossing on Depot Street and was graced with a train about 30 minutes later. There I had it. My first snowy train was rather unceremonious on the surface, but I was delighted. I'd planned to travel today anyway in order to be in Kentucky for CSX's Santa train, and decided to amend the schedule once I saw an early winter storm was due into the area. Bluefield is the western end of NS's main artery through the Central American region, bridging a crucial gap between here and Roanoke. Connecting Chicago to Charleston and New Orleans to New York, this high iron highway is of massive importance for the railroad. Roanoke is one of their largest terminals, with 6 different lines converging in town, spitting out the parallel Christiansburg and Whitethorn districts to make up the majority of the trip to Bluefield. The Pocahontas district takes over just east of town, turning north on the Virginia side and shooting off the Clinch River district deeper into coal country. It's quite the railroading stage that Bluefield sits on, and although never at the top of my list, it was perfect for the likewise combination of wintry events. Growing up on CSX, I'd always known railroads to be split up by subdivisions, but the Norfolk Southern does so through districts and divisions. Just west of where I'm standing, the East River District splits from the Clinch Valley District, with the former heading north as a busy main line, while the latter extends into the Appalachians as part of the Pocahontas Division. The Pokey is a network of NS routes through Appalachian coal country, with the Clinch Valley District stretching all the way into St. Paul, Virginia, where I'd see it intersect with the Santa train in just 28 short hours. Railroading in coal country is a neat, niche operation within the industry, and is something I'd love to explore when time allows. Nothing was detracting from my morning in Bluefield, however, as the line seemed to be livening up for the day. Only 20 minutes separated the first train from the second, this time coming off the Clinch Valley District. It was quite the sensory overload as the engines charged towards West Virginia. As far as I know, the Clinch Valley doesn't host any regularly scheduled freights. This manifest could have been a reroute from a few different lines, as the Appalachian route is well connected to a handful of NS's other arteries. I'm also not gonna pretend like I fully understand the scope of railroading here in Appalachia, as Norfolk Southern and coal country railroading are both rather foreign. That's part of what makes some outings so fun. With little expectations usually come great results. Such was the case with this rogue manifest, as only 25 cars separated the DPU from 3 manned helpers on the rear. I didn't even know helpers operated in this area, but more than welcomed the surprise with the recognizable growl of GE motors. Six engines powering one train. I will happily take it. As the eastbound presumably pulled into Bluefield to drop the helpers, I decided to depart Depot Street and move into West Virginia, as much of the Bluefield terminal is visible from the parallel state road. As I was running without a scanner today, this was extremely helpful, cluing me into the imminent departure of eastbound coal loads. I set up on Old Princeton Road, spanning the tracks, zooming in to realize that there were not 1, not 2, or 3, but 4 trains in my frame. The rear DPU of a westbound coal train can be seen deeper within the terminal, while empty coal and MOW trains sat on tracks 3 and 4. You know it's a busy yard when you miss a train while jumping to the other side of it, and such was Bluefield. I realized pretty quickly there's no way to see every train in and out of town, which is a great problem to have when blitzing the area like I was. Knowing this, I decided to stick with the loads in order to get some active exploration along the Christiansburg district. Getting shipped off for delivery to those on the naughty list, the black diamonds appeared extra seasonal, covered in some fresh snow. It was quite the snowscape, as the long line of loaded coal hoppers made their way for export out of Lambert's Point. As the coal train drifted away from Old Princeton Road, I set off to chase it further into West Virginia along the Pocahontas District. Ingleside Road was proving its usefulness, paralleling NS for miles on the east side of town. The snow was sticking to the ground in a concentrated 15-mile area between Bluefield and Oakvale, which meant I would be very well acquainted with these small communities by the end of the day. Traffic levels were high enough to keep me busy, but not frantic enough to where I couldn't enjoy the scenery. East River follows both road and rail out of Bluefield, and I was excitedly set up between the three in a community called Hardy. During the 10 minutes that I waited for and watched these coal loads, only a single car passed me by on Ingleside Road. With under 50 residencies, I can't imagine the population of Hardy is much larger. Exploring such remote regions is always a blast to me, especially when accompanied by a heavy train and pretty vistas. From Hardy, the chase continued as I easily caught up to the Black Diamonds near Oakvale when we were rudely interrupted by train 29C. That meant an immediate U-turn and back on the road for a location I call the Ingleside Bridges. The trains just refused to let up. It's not priority intermodal, but a pusher greeting me at the bridges was quite appropriate given the volume I'd seen so far. Yet again, surrounded by the East River, Ingleside Road, and the Pokey, northbound 29C was quick to catch up to me. With this day trip in Bluefield a last-minute decision, I didn't have much time to put into looking for good spots. What little planning was done had put the Ingleside Bridges on my radar, and once personally exploring it, I realized how saturated this area is with great angles. The heavy rail traffic and wonderful weather really made this day memorable. It's always a good feeling when last-minute plans produce great results. Departing 5 times a week from Charlotte, North Carolina, 29C is one of the highest priority trains on the Norfolk Southern. It exclusively carries hot domestic intermodal, terminating at the railroad's Calumet Yard in Chicago, Illinois. Today's version was 101 platforms of the typical carriers, such as J.B. Hunt, Amazon Prime, Hub Group, and UPS. Seeing Schneider on Norfolk Southern is atypical, as the Orange Container Company continues to strengthen its dependence on CSX and Union Pacific. While intermodal logistics are interesting, I of course have to mention the SD70 ACE up front, a welcomed departure from the ever-intrusive AC44 C6M rebuilds that NS employs in the thousands. As 29C and its white-hot UPS traffic faded into the Alleghenies, I decided to double back for Hardy. I had no idea when my next train would be or where it would be heading, but figured the bidirectional vistas would do the trick. I only waited for about half an hour until the promising sound of prime movers under power filled the air. This was the same eastbound I'd seen earlier in the morning with its curious 2x1x3 configuration of locomotives. Looking east from the Peggy Branch Road crossing, we can see a sharp curve through some rock faces, the same one that had framed this morning's eastbound coal train. Only 4,800 rulers are needed to measure the track distance between Peggy Branch, the Hardy Fill, and the Ingleside bridges. I had really struck gold here on the east side of Bluefield. The town's terminal seemed to swallow just about every train up for hours, with 29C being the only run-through of the day that I'm aware of. Although still equipped with its DPU, I had a feeling this manifest left its helpers back at the yard. I always find it interesting when a mid-train DPU's placement is so skewed, just like this manifest. This can arise from several circumstances, such as the spread of weight on a train, or if there are any sizable pickups and drop-offs en route. A few years ago, I watched a CSX manifest drop 96 cars from its head end into Florida's Wildwood Yard, bumping the mid-train DPU up to only 22 cars behind the head pin. This was just about the exact opposite as the 3 locomotives eased their train down the mountain towards Roanoke. As it was nearing lunchtime, I decided I'd give a half-hearted chase before breaking out the cooler. Passing the DPU in Oakville, the snow was starting to disappear, but I wanted to go further east in order to lay eyes on something interesting. Just past Oakville, in Kellysville, there comes into view a second piece of railroad, the Princeton Deepwater District. It's been following the Pokey for 8 miles, just 700 feet north of me at the Ingleside bridges, and only 200 feet from the tracks and I in Oakville. An ex-Virginian right-of-way, the PD district descends down to level up with the Pocahontas before joining it here at PD Junction. There's not much traffic on the Princeton Deepwater, with most movements coal-related, coming from or going to the Kanawha River Railroad further north. As I continued to run alongside the manifest, I'd realized the snow was now completely gone near the town of Glen Lynn, Virginia, and didn't want to stray too far from the powder. With that in mind and food in my belly, it was back west on Ingleside Road, as I figured the 2,000-foot climb would put me back in the conditions I desired. It's crazy what only a few minutes of driving will get you, as I pulled off in Bluefield to a stacked main line. The coal and ballast trains from earlier were still laying over on the secondary tracks, as an eastbound intermodal was occupying the main. There's a footbridge perfect for railfanning underneath these signals, which brought good news as the intermodal departed eastbound. While there had been intermittent downtime, the day had been relatively busy. The railroad was quite accommodating to my chase style, as I'd chase a train in one direction and more or less find another one heading back to where I came from. Such was the case yet again, as I was able to beat the stacker a few miles out of town to a location known as Dam Hollow, just underneath Ingleside Road. I had swung by Dam Hollow earlier in the day and noted it for a good eastbound shot, and was pleased to be taking advantage. Rarely does a going away shot look better than the traditional angle in my opinion, but I think Dam Hollow might do it for me. The mountainous terrain and snowy dirt road really brought it together in my opinion, only to be bested by some international containers. I love the rainbow of steamship lines one can find on international stack trains, with this block undoubtedly heading for the Port of Virginia's sister container terminals in the Class 1's namesake city. The POV originates and lands over a dozen intermodal trains daily, sending 34% of their containers via steel-wheel transport. Today's train is primarily made up of Hapag-Lloyd boxes, the 5th largest container ship company in the world. When I shot this video in late 2024, HL was still sharing their service loops with CMA, ONE, Yangming, and Hyundai, as evidenced by the occasional non-orange container. The container ship world has undergone a massive reorg since then, with Hapag ditching everybody and almost exclusively partnered with Maersk. I'm sure we'll start to see a lot more orange and gray on these intermodal trains. Such as NS is the result of mergers, so is Hapag-Lloyd, whose most notable predecessors are Nile Dutch and UASC. As some locomotives still wear the colors of their former owners, so do these containers, with Nile Dutch blue and UASC green seen sprinkled in today's train. Hapag also operates a large amount of 20-foot tank containers used for overseas shipment of gaseous chemicals. As the tanks are laden with what is essentially compressed air, they are very heavy, so you'll rarely see them double stacked with other loads. If it's not evident the global shipping industry is a hobby of mine as well, it's just much harder to appreciate since I can't chase the container ships up and down the West Virginia mountainsides. The container ship industry has a lot of subtle parallels to railroading, right down to equipment leasing companies such as CAI and Triton. As you'd find a GATX locomotive anywhere in the country, you may find the dark blue boxes of Kronos anywhere in the world, leased out to whichever line needs a quick provision of space for a nearby customer. These leased containers can change ownership with every voyage of theirs, or be leased for long term and often painted to resemble their parent steamship line. With fallen flags, service design, public image, and equipment utilization to name a few, I enjoy the similarities between the container ship industry and railroading. But enough about the ships and let's get back to the trains, as this hybrid movement was begging to be chased. The vibrant colors looked great passing through the remote and snowy countryside, as I found the lead rebuild again near the Ingleside bridges. This left me only a few seconds at the Hardy Fill. I'm not sure if either location has an official name, but now at least there's an unofficial one. The effects of Norfolk Southern's East Palestine derailment live in infamy 2 years after the event. Still mending public relations and financial positions, the railroad also mandates distributed power on any train longer than 10,000 feet as a result of the catastrophe. It's hard to know whether this rule is for appeasement or because of legitimate findings, but either way creates neat opportunities for rail fans on the otherwise incredibly monotonous railroad. Aside from their 30-odd special interest engines, NS has nearly no variation in their utilitarian black and white paint schemes. Even for a Class 1, variation among locomotive models is almost non-existent, but the DPUs provide me a reprieve. I'll never tire of a distributed power unit, as it's so cool to watch thousands of horsepower roll by amongst the clanking of their freight train. With the snowfall disappearing near Oakville, the range within I'd chase trains was more or less defined from there to Bluefield. Hardy made for a nice halfway point, with multiple scenic locations easily accessible no matter the train's direction. I couldn't help it, and for the fourth time today, found myself chasing a train through Oakville. I knew I couldn't stray any farther from the snow, so decided to relax with some late lunch while the stacks continued towards Norfolk. On a side note, I wonder if my tuna came out of this Haypag reefer. I guess anything's possible. The sushi wasn't all I had my eye on in Oakville, as a large pile of rail spikes appeared to be just the right volume to fit in my truck bed. I had time for a singular piece of sushi between the intermodal and this manifest, frantically wiping the soy sauce off my fingers so I could properly work the camera. At this point, I probably don't need to say it, but I'm going to anyway. I chased this train too, running up Ingleside Road for the 5th time today. It had been nothing short of a blast as I pulled off along Appalachian Aggregates Mining Access Road with a sweet head-on view. If there's one thing I wish I got more of today, it's drone videos. I have nobody but myself to blame, as I neglected to bring gloves into the Mountain State, and the wind chill was totally bonkers. I will still look back on today with nothing but fond memories, especially for not having a scanner and going into the day relatively blind. I felt as though it had been a complete success. It was my first time chasing trains through the snow, with plenty of all three. I found the manifest again on Old Princeton Road, looking east into the Alleghenies as the train snaked its way towards the Bluefield terminal. The snow had melted only marginally, and I was happy to have seen a train from both directions on the bridge. Now, I'm no signal connoisseur, but that looks to me like a color position light, and a functional one at that. This is one of a few I've ever seen, with the only other one in the memory bank from the Northeast Corridor a few years back. As with nearly every other train today, it looked like this westbound manifest was set to pull off in Bluefield, likely for a crew change at the very least. The wintry days are not only blustery, but also quite short. My drive further west was anything but, and thus I was begrudgingly preparing to part ways with the Bluefield terminal. I get sidetracked pretty easily, however, and upon seeing this, decided a few more minutes couldn't hurt. As I passed the resident hopper trains, I knew exactly where I wanted to set up for the impending eastbound, overlooking Dam Hollow on the side of, you guessed it, Ingleside Road. I'd been marveling at the view all day and wanted to make it work with an outbound from Bluefield. Mountain peaks and felled trees made for a captivating background as the train treated me to a short wait atop the overlook. Heading west for Elkhorn City, Kentucky lined my path up with the previous westbounds, and I just had to get him one more time on the Virginia side of town. This day was just about as much as I could have asked for. After seeing 8 trains 14 times in a variety of scenes, my first day in West Virginia was absolutely a successful one. Thanks for railfanning with me today. I hope you enjoyed this action-packed railroad snow day as much as I did.